morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion on this Monday morning. Yes, I said Monday because we had that shortened week last week, and that certainly didn't stop the markets from having some incredible movement across the board, and the volumes were just extraordinary. But before we get to that, let's just take a look at what Friday really did bring to us, because it was a really interesting trading session. We actually started off the day, the Dow was up over 200 points. We had a brief sort of a pullback. We almost sort of looked like we maybe started to want to move back up to the upside, recover all the way. Did not happen. That final hour or so absolutely got crushed, and the markets did finish down 270 points. So starting up 200 points and then finishing down 270 points, pretty nice broad swath right there in terms of the intraday move. And the NASDAQ was no different. The NASDAQ, it was up early on about 90 points or so. It moved around very similarly to the Dow itself, and then finished down about 130 points. So a pretty big smash onto the NASDAQ. Matter of fact, in the final hour of the NASDAQ, we pushed down about 100 of those negative points to the downside. Just an unbelievable moves. We talk about volume, we talk about volatility, and we talk about velocity. We had all three V's as part of the day on Friday. So that was certainly did stand out for us. Volumes. Now, I mentioned volume. I mentioned it all the time, and it's part of the reason we're always so excited here at Market Rebellion. We're talking about volume, but we're talking about it in the derivatives markets. Well, 45.2 million contracts we had trading on Friday. Gives you a little bit of an idea of just how active things really were. Apple, of course, always or almost always the number one. It had 3 million contracts trading in Apple. We had 1.4 million in Tesla. We had a little over a million in AMC. Yeah, those rebel stocks are still around. People seem to have
SWB audio capture,
a little bit
not
about
registered.
what's going on there, but those rebel stocks or meme stocks certainly continue to have a lot of activity, and we certainly are monitoring a lot of that. As a matter of fact, we might even have one of those in our unusual and just up in just a little bit here. So, you know, interesting markets. The market's definitely flowing around. Certainly there is Delta and COVID that are still affecting things, and what that might have in terms of effects on the economy itself. That all said, it really was a day that everybody wanted to talk about Apple. And Apple actually probably in the big scheme of things had a big win, but they did lose one of the 10 different allegations against them. And that was something that seemed to catch everybody a little bit off guard. So the stock was hit to the downside. Apple finished down about, call it 3% or so. Not a violent move to the downside, but certainly a move to the downside after hitting those new highs just days before that. So I think that was really the trading point of the day. But technology, yeah, it started to push to the downside. Healthcare was definitely getting pushed to the downside. Energy held in there, but it still barely even held on to flat. Financials, of course, were down. Industrials were down. When you get a market like we had, where you've got the NASDAQ down over 100 and you've got the Dow itself down over 200, almost 300, yeah, you're going to see pretty much almost all the major indices usually sort of participating there. Energy, the reason that held in there pretty well, you take a look over at crude, and crude's been kind of moving around towards that 70 and hanging on to that 70. As a matter of fact, today, lifting up a little bit higher even than that, but we'll get into that in 1 second. We had a couple of big movers that I think are worth highlighting from last week. We had UPS. That certainly stood out on Friday. You had Activision, you had Freeport Mac, Peloton, those names. But on the downside, we had Tesla, which actually started off okay, and that sort of almost went in sentiment a little bit with Apple. So you had Apple, you had Tesla, you had Okta, you had United Health, JP Morgan. You get the idea. A very, very broad swath of
SWB audio capture, not registered.
Pulling on the market. So today we come in and we take a look at the markets, and we look like we're ready to erase a lot of those negative markets that we were seeing on Friday. The Dow was up about 200 in the pre. It's continued to accelerate. It's pulled back a little bit off of the early highs. Last I had seen, it was trading up about 230 points. I'd seen highs up over 270 points. So pulling back just a little bit, but that was just before I came on. Things are changing so rapidly as we get closer into this first hour of trade. It's pretty amazing. I mentioned velocity. Well, we've definitely got velocity here as well. So you take a look over at the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ was up 75. Then it was up 90. And then the next thing you know, you blink and you look, and there it is trading in the red. And then it starts pushing a little bit lower and lower, down 40, down 60. Last I looked, it was trading down about 60 points. Biotech, certainly one of those that's pulling on it. Chinese names certainly pulling on the NASDAQ as well. And then add the big flip in technology. Technology had started off the day pretty strong. and then started to move into the negative, into the red. So it's just been a lot of different movements that we are seeing. We know it's not moving downside. Has been energy. Energy started the day up 2%. It was up as much as 3.5%, pulled back a little bit. And then last I looked, it was trading up about 3%. But technology, as I mentioned, and some of these others, definitely making a flip from a very nice positive start into a little bit of movement, at least into the red by just a little bit. Now, Bitcoin, 45,000. We had been talking about how it had been hanging right around that 50,000 level, but then all of a sudden we started to get a little bit of a pullback later in the week, a little bit more. We got 47,000, 48,000. Next thing you know, we're looking now today closer to about 45,000 for Bitcoin. The 10-year basically has been absolutely locked at this 1.3, between call it 1.3 and 1.35, 1.37, somewhere in there. Very, very tight range of late for the 10-year, at least so far. Now, volatility, that's something I skipped kind of over about last week.
SWB audio capture, not
20.
registered.
We actually closed right underneath 21 last week. Today, we were in the 19s. Then when we started to see this little bit of a flip in the NASDAQ, we started to see the volatility index start to rise a little bit and actually up into the 20s. So maybe I guess we can count that as, all right, we did get into the 20s late on Friday. We're in the 20s now here early Monday. We've been talking about how long is a sustained move where we see volatility actually holding on to that 20, or does it reverse as it has been in the past and start to pull back towards those middle and upper teens? We'll see. We'll keep a close eye on that. There's no doubt about that. So at the very beginning of the day, every single sector was in the green. Nothing was in the red. I looked over, as a matter of fact, the Dow, the only stock that was in the red early on was Nike, which had a downgrade today. So it was really started off as a positive day. A lot of that has changed as we've gotten a little bit deeper into the day, first hour of the day. So the standouts for me that really start pushing to the upside, you got those beta names in energy. You've got EOG, you've got Devon, you got Marathon, you've got Occidental, all those names very, very strong. You got some weakness in those Chinese names. We've talked about this movement back and forth, mostly to the upside of late for the Chinese names, but they've had some pullbacks. But you look at something like the FXI, gives you a nice barometer. But I take a look over at trip.com, PDD, JD, all these various names, and you start to see a lot of names that have pushed into the red. What's not into the red, what's been absolutely on fire, and it's interesting to hear the guys on CNBC and Financial TV talking about uranium today. This is something at Market Rebellion we've been talking about for multiple weeks. You go back, you can take a look. August 19th is when we started seeing some incredible bullish paper in CCJ, Kamiko, and that's a uranium play. Anyway, that stock was trading around 15 and a half, thereabouts. Today it got up and over 26, gives you a little bit of an idea. That's why we follow the smart money, the unusual option activity that we see. And we have seen incredible, over 10 different very bullish hits.
SWB audio capture, not registered.
Late part of August until just this past weekend. So a lot of activity there. Uranium's been on fire. It's been moving to the upside. It's already made a nearly $10 move to the upside, actually $11 move to the upside. So it just shows you how fast these things really can move, and especially when you see hit after hit after hit after hit. So I got two unusuals, and I got to get over to the halftime report. I'm going to hit artificial intelligence first. That's Najarian, excuse me, ATER. Now this one's pretty interesting. It's actually hit on our systems a couple times. If you take a really quick look at this name, you're going to see, again, the rebel side of things where you've got that high short interest. Well, you're absolutely going to see it here. These are the names that can move. You're seeing a big move today. I'd seen it up as much as 40%. I'd seen it up as much as 30%. Nice, strong moves to the upside. Doesn't mean that can hold, but we certainly had some very interesting activity. Stock was trading about 1590, a little bit more than 1590. 4,000 of the September 17 and a half calls were being bought. They started at $1.35. They went all the way up to 250. Just understand, this is a very volatile stock, and it will be a very volatile stock. That short interest definitely has that squeeze potential to the upside. And of course, if those shorts want to just jump back in there, maybe they try to push to the downside. We've seen this in AMC. We've seen it in GameStop. We've seen it in many names. And this is just the latest, greatest. It's hit 5 times with activity just in the last couple of weeks looking for upside. OVV is the next one. Now, this one's definitely unusual and definitely interesting because Inventive is an oil and gas name I have never seen. Maybe we've seen it before on the unusual, but I don't recall seeing it before. Stock was trading around $29.50. We had a buyer of 3,000 of the October 34 calls in there, 50 cents to 55 cents. The interesting part is 2 prints total, 50 cents, the next print, 55 cents.
SWB audio capture, not
So
registered.
interesting to see that on a day where we see energy having such a nice move to the upside, looking for maybe a little extra torque out of a name like this on OVV. Folks, have a great day of trading. I will see you at noon at the halftime report on CNBC. Until then, have great luck, but it's not always about luck. It's about knowledge. Get knowledge if you can. Market Rebellion, we got some great educators here. You're going to want to check it out. I mentioned those volumes. The derivatives markets are the place to be. Giddy up. Let's go.